there was a movie that I'd watched like many years ago, and it was called Perks of Being a Wallflower. And I had watched the movie and I didn't pay attention to any of it. It was a 2 hour movie. There was these heavy themes and topics. Did not pay attention to it whatsoever. But for some reason, I don't know if this happens to you, but I just remember that. I don't know why. The movie just, I recollected. I was like looking on something online and I saw it and I was like, oh yeah, that movie. It was critically acclaimed. I hated that movie. I hated it so much. And I remember ranting to my friend, like, I just hate that movie. It's so depressing. I don't like it. You know, it shows mental illness in such a way. And I was just like so adamant about like, I don't like this movie. And I was like, well, I haven't seen it in years. It started off simple. It was like little clips online. And then I was like, you know what? They have it for free on Freevee or something. Let me watch part of the movie. And an interesting thing happened for me. I got very emotional. I was like, I was not expecting it. So basically, the short synopsis of the movie is this kid went through, trauma, but he was suppressing it. And then he kind of has a psychotic break at the end. And, I'm watching the scene where he goes through his psychotic break. He's like, all this trauma and all this stuff he's been suppressing is now coming to light. And he's just like, I can't control myself. I don't know what to do. And I'm watching the whole process and I was like, why am I getting so upset? Like, I'm getting so upset. I'm getting anxious. I was like, I don't want to watch this. I don't want to watch it. So I go back to the friend again. I'm like, I hate this movie. But I took some time for myself and I did some reflection. I was like, well, why do I feel so emotional when he's getting his psychotic break? And I think for me, I can identify with that character. I can identify with a character who suppressed so much throughout like his early adolescence, and then it just all comes to light and it's so overwhelming. In high school, I would suppress my emotions a lot. And it's something because I just didn't know how to deal with all of it. It was a lot. So I just put in a little box. And I had my own psychotic break because I was hearing things that weren't there. It was really scary for me and it happened for an entire year. So that's when I knew I need to get help. Someone had suggested it, but I was just like, yeah, I'm hearing things that aren't there. I should probably get help. So that's kind of when I knew, yeah, I need to get help.
There is no one size fits all with depression. In teenagers, it can be expressed in many different ways.
I take some tests, there's the ink blots, there's all these different things, come out with a diagnosis, and I was like, ooh, I wonder if it's going to be something sexy. That's crazy. It's not like there's a sexy mental illness, but there's definitely more glorified than others. And I got clinical depression. I was like, that's the worst one. And I was like, I'm going to be depressed for the rest of my life. And then a friend of mine was like, that doesn't mean you're going to be depressed for the rest of your life. That's just one of the labels. So I was like, I want to get medication. My mom's like, listen, you better go see a therapist. So I go to see a therapist and something interesting happens. I remember the first meeting that I had with a therapist, and all I kept talking about was a boy. Plot twist, I'm gay. I was talking about this boy, and upon further inspection and really seeing the whole thing from a higher perspective, I could tell that it was almost me putting up the walls for like the intimacy, right? Because you go to therapy and they can only help you as much as you give them information. So if I'm only talking about boys or my sexuality or this, that's all they can help me with. So that was something that I think was, important in my journey because I had to figure out like, okay, do you want to get better or do you want to just talk about romantic relationships? I did the romantic relationships for a while.
Nearly 20% of children ages 3 to 17 in the United States have a mental, emotional, developmental, or behavioral disorder.
When I was going to therapy, I had so many different doctors, right? I have my therapist, psychiatrist, all those different things. And, there were some that resonated, some that didn't. But something I quickly learned is how important it is to advocate for yourself. It's very important. And, there were certain things they were saying, hey, get medicated for this and that. And I just noticed things within my body like, hey, I'm getting really bad side effects to this, or this is happening, or this isn't even working for what I'm being treated for. And I think within that time, I found it very important to say, you know what? No, hold on, stop. can we have a conversation about this? And years back, I would have never have done that. I would have been like, the doctor's always right. The doctor's always correct. Who am I to say anything about my own body? But it was something that was very valuable for me because it not only translated into healthcare, but in different areas of my life, really advocating for myself and advocating for my mental health. So that was an important journey that I'm glad that I took. When it happened, I was annoyed. I was like, why can't they just get it right? Or why can't they read my mind? Or why can't they just know how my body is? But without that communication piece and really saying it out loud and really saying, hey, these are the things that I want, and being able to advocate for me and saying the things that I want and what I need and being very clear about that, there's, a lot of power that comes with that, and almost taking you out of the victimization of like, oh, they're doing these things to me and I have this disorder and like everything's bad, as opposed to like, all right, what's the plan? What's the goals? What is it that I want to accomplish? And it feels less like, all right, I have this thing, as opposed to like, no, well, what are the strides that I want to make to become better? For me, the road to healing, the road to recovery, for me, in terms of helping my mental health, is really putting that first. It's almost like when they tell you in the airplane, like you gotta put the oxygen mask on yourself before you can help others. And for the longest time, I was a people pleaser. I'm like, well, I want to make everyone happy, and I would stretch myself so thin, but I wouldn't take the time to really sit with me and be like, what does Sherry want? What does Sherry need? What is best for Sherry at this moment? And what was best for me at that moment is validating and being comfortable with my feelings. Because that's kind of how I got here, right? I suppressed all these feelings, compartmentalized them, and then it kind of manifested in such a way that I was like, ooh, this is scary. I gotta go get help. But as I become more comfortable with my feelings, I validate them, I take the time to process them and do all those things, it feels like you gain a sense of power and knowing yourself so well, and it's easier to communicate, easier to articulate what you need from others, different relationships. So it affected so many different parts of my life, whether it be professionally, with family, all those things. So that was probably the most important for me. So I'm glad that I took that journey. I think an important thing for me was trusting myself and my intuition. Because for the longest time, there was always like, this little like, and it's something that I had to figure out. Therapy helped, talking with people helped, but it's the difference between like an anxious thought, because when I have an anxious thought, it's like, if I don't do this, something bad will happen, as opposed to this still quiet voice of like, maybe just do this. And you could tell vibrationally. So I think developing that and getting more acquainted with myself, and it starts with really getting in touch with your feelings, that you open up more and you're like, intuition, you know what? For some reason, I just feel like I should take an umbrella today, or for some reason, I just have this inner knowing that this is how I want my path to go. Something like that. It's something that, I've developed, and everyone has it. And I think for me, I was always, looking for someone who had the answers. I was like, you have the answers, or you can tell me like what to do or whatever. So I didn't have that trust within myself of like, well, you're also smart. You also know you very well. You also have your own intuition. You have this. And it was just those beautiful affirmations that I was telling myself, that I developed that intuition piece of like, you know what? Yeah, I do know stuff. I can go out there and I will be okay. I'm going to be great. So that was a big thing for me.
If you feel all alone, struggling with depression, maybe want to end it all, call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org.